Yeah.
Now call the meeting of the Waco City Council on March 16th, 2021 to order at 2 p.m. Joining me online today are Mayor Pro Tem Hector Sabito, Councilmember Andrea Bearfield, Councilmember Josh Borderud, Councilmember Kelly Palmer, and Councilmember Jim Holmes. City staff also online today are Bradley Ford, our city manager, Jennifer Ritchie, our city attorney, and Esmeralda Hudson, our city secretary. Now we will have a moment of silence. Thank you. On March 16th, 2020, the governor suspended various provisions of the Open Meetings Act pursuant to his state of disaster authority. The change was effective on March 16th, 2020 until further notice or until the state of disaster declaration expires. In accordance with physical distancing guidelines and while providing for as much transparency as possible, this meeting will not be open to the public attending in person. This meeting is being broadcast live at wccc.tv. The audio is also being recorded. The video and audio recordings will be available to the public. According to the governor and attorney general, statutes that may require face-to-face interaction between members of the public and public officials are suspended, provided, however, that the governmental body offers alternative methods of communications with their public officials. This includes public comment on agenda items. In an effort to allow for as much public input as possible, those who wish to speak or submit their written comments on a listed agenda item were asked to register with the city secretary's office by noon today. Individuals who register to speak on an agenda item must limit their comments to 3 minutes. On items other than public hearings, speakers will be allotted 1 3-minute presentation, regardless of the number of agenda items the speaker wishes to address. We will now recess the regular session and convene to the work session with a report from the city manager, Bradley Ford.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. I don't have any changes to the agenda today, so I'd like to move right into employee recognition and organizational update, and wanted to just note it is the second day for Dr. Cheryl Victorian as police chief here in Waco, and she's joining us today. She's certainly hit the ground running, and I look forward to, as I know the council does as well, seeing her impact in the community in the work that lies ahead over the next days and years. And so just wanted to mark that occasion and welcome her nickname. Deputy City Manager Emerson found out we're going to call her Dr. Chief. And so, she's got both titles, and that's a good way to let her know you're thinking of her. Dr. Chief, welcome to Waco, and looking forward to seeing your work here.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. We do, council, have 4 informal reports on the agenda today. The first is IR 2021-145, which is an update on COVID-19. Again, we do these each council meeting, and I've found them to be helpful. And hopefully y'all have too. Obviously, cases remain on the decline, and vaccines are headed up. Those are 2 positives of note. The March 4th to March 6th clinic was our best in the proportion of doses that went to non-white participants. And so you can see we remain focused on equitable distribution. And for last week's clinic, we gave out more than 4,100 first and second doses to the community. So that was one of our highest totals in the vaccination effort since the vaccination effort started. And last week's clinic was really kind of unique for a couple of reasons. First, we had the community collaboration with Region 12 and our area school districts to vaccinate teachers in accordance to CDC and DISH's guidance. And it was also our first time to work with both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. So kudos to the staff that led that effort. And looking ahead in our next informal report on April 6th, staff will be providing an update on the work of the Equitable Vaccine Allocation Committee, including our plan to serve the most vulnerable populations in our community, particularly the homeless. And so be looking forward to that on April 6th.
City Manager Ford, if I'm sorry, I didn't, Councilmember Bearfield, go for it.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I really want to applaud city staff and the health district. I did notice in week 10, there was a lot more diversity in the people that received the vaccine. And so I know that staff has really taken the comments and the sentiments of council and saying, how do we make this more equitable to all of our constituency? And so I just really I know a lot of times we tell you guys, we want, and we don't tell you enough. Thank you for listening to what we want. And so I really want to say thank you to you and your staff for making that happen. I really do applaud your efforts.
And if you want to respond to him, go ahead. Okay. I agree and echo Councilmember Sabito in the definite inspiration and applauding the efforts of our staff and getting it done. You mentioned the efforts for our homeless population, and I was curious as to, I know that we had begun efforts with getting our homebound citizens vaccinated, and I was curious as to if we were making any progress with that effort.
I'll invite Deidre Emerson, our Deputy City Manager, to comment.
So yes, Councilmember, we have, there's a state program that Saving Our Seniors that is in effect. We continue to work with our counterparts through TDM to see when our community comes up on that list. But we're not waiting on that. We have made contact with Meals on Wheels and working to figure out how we can best implement that with our homebound, and so we don't want to wait on the state to get here. We want to make sure that we take care of our own too.
Excellent, thank you. I appreciate that effort, and I thought I had heard that, but I'm really glad to hear it and be able to share that with our citizens, that we do have a plan and pathway for those who are homebound and have no way to get to our vaccination clinics, would that we want them to be there or not. They just could not. And so I'm glad to see that those efforts are being pushed forward. Thank you.
This is Holmes. I'll chime in here too. I like the fact that we're taking on the big challenges here of the volume of the vaccine distribution that we're going to be facing here in the next 30, 60 days. And we're getting prepared for it. And I think that also is evident in a couple of resolutions that we'll talk about here in a bit. And the other part is just the equitable distribution. And in fact, as my council member, the council members said before me, that we were intentional on trying to make that work. And we're seeing it, we're assessing it, and we're making it, getting the best we can to make that right. And then I got to give a shout out. Case counts are down, trending in the right direction. I want to attribute all this to our new public health director, Miss Mallory Horn. She's doing a great job so far. But I appreciate her coming in and stabilizing it in a very tough time. And she's doing a great job. Appreciate the early returns.
Also want to jump in and just say I'm really looking forward to seeing the next report with the specific guidelines for these vulnerable populations. For residents watching, the Public Health District hasn't received allocations yet of the Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine, and hopefully that will be something that we have access to. That will just be such a game changer for these particularly vulnerable populations, whether they are our homebound residents, our residents experiencing homelessness, just the logistics of having to give a resident a vaccine one time as opposed to 2 times over several weeks is, I think, going to be a significant game changer for us. And want to also celebrate and point out the fact that 61% of the vaccines we've distributed have been to our residents over 65, which we know that because of comorbidities and all sorts of other social determinants of health, those are our most vulnerable residents. So that number feels incredibly important and worth celebrating. So good job, Deidre, and our wonderful new director of the Public Health District, LaShonda, just for the great work that has been laid and the work that we will see over the coming weeks.
Yeah, I'll just say, the proactivity and critical thinking and strategizing that has gone into this continues to impress me by our team, both in City Hall and our Public Health District and in the private sector here locally as well. The idea a year ago, the idea of members of our city staff and Public Health District running a community-wide public vaccination clinic with this urgency and this level of concern would have been unthinkable. There's nothing precedented for this. And we've been able to put together these public vaccination clinics. And I'm so proud of that. I mean, just the work that we've done in ensuring our community is safe is something to be really proud of. So thank you so much for our staff and other members of our community stepping up in unprecedented times to take powerful steps forward.
Thank you, council members, for those comments. We aim to serve and certainly look forward to doing that in the weeks ahead, continuing that. The second IR is 2021-146. It's a set of follow-ups that are being provided from an earlier council work session in February regarding the property project. And one of those follow-ups that I did want to specifically highlight is we're suggesting a proposed maximum property value upon completion of $350,000, and staff's proposing that maximum so that city incentive policies are not seen or not having the effect of incentivizing gentrification in the core of Waco. Wanted to highlight that specifically, and then also highlight that staff plans to bring revised policies and agreements to the City Council, McLennan County, and Waco ISD in April for adoption. Our third IR is 2021-147, and it's an update provided again to a previous work session related to airport communications and our terminal rehabilitation project. As council will recall, staff is working with an architect to design a $2.3 million renovation of the airport terminal using CARES resources that were provided directly to Waco Regional Airport. The city manager's office and airport leadership received a briefing a couple of weeks ago to review project renderings and progress. And after that review, staff adjusted the project schedule by about 45 to 60 days to really allow time for the architect to incorporate local imagery and cultural aspects into the design. We also have invited Creative Waco into that effort as well to support us. Staff will bring back conceptual designs for the terminal to an airport advisory board meeting, as well as a future city council work session here in the next couple of months. So you can get a good look at the progress.
City Manager Ford, if I may again, first of all, I want to say thank you for this report. It is good to see that the expense of the airport is coming out of CARES money and not necessarily the general fund. So I really want to congratulate the airport staff and city staff for that. I appreciate the partnerships that we are creating, well, that we're utilizing with Creative Waco to really give a nod to the creativity of our community. I was looking at the renderings, and you brought this, you mentioned it a little bit as you were introducing the IR, but I know one thing that has been very important to me, and I would say some other council members, is that when people are coming in to the Waco airport, that they know that they are in Waco. And so as I was looking at the renderings, I didn't see a lot of that, but I guess by your introduction that the renderings will be maybe changed up a bit and really bring that conceptual to life, really, of what we're looking for as to giving that nod to our city. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, Mayor Pro Tem, that's absolutely correct. And I think you only get really once every 20 years or so a chance to do a project like this. And so we certainly want to incorporate the feedback that council's given us at prior work sessions and really make this a home run.
Absolutely agree with you, and thank you for that. I just know, like as you said, we really have a once in 2 or 3 decade opportunity to really make an impact with our airport, and there's so much great things going on in our airport. And as we begin to bounce back and traveling begins to increase again, and hopefully one day tourism begin to increase in Waco again, I know that there's just so much possibilities with our airport. So thank you for that.
I'd like to, go ahead.
No. Feel free, Josh.
I just wanted to briefly echo Mayor Pro Tem Sabito's comments, because I agree. I think it's crucial because it's a first impression for the city when people land in that airport for a lot of first-time visitors flying into Waco. So I appreciate City Manager Ford's intentionality with kind of the design, the art, the way that's going to be structured, because I do think it really sets the tone as we welcome these new visitors into our city. So thank you.
City Manager Ford, I echo my council members in saying that it is due season for this facelift, and it's good to know that we all are in agreement about the feel of what that first impression should be, and the opportunity to really show off Waco's assets and jewels that we have in the city. And the airport is the first place that the non-typical traveler is going to see. So, making this effort aligned with the communication effort that is going along with this to really, toot our horn, that the fact that we do have a, almost 100% on time airport, that flies right into the city, that still has free parking. And those kinds of things, that's a story that needs to be told. And I think I appreciate that the communication and marketing effort that will go along with this facelift. I think it will do wonders for our airport. To just jump back to 146, I'm glad to see that these efforts are also being shared with our fellow taxation partners, because I think that one of the things is that we all do together. And so sharing with the county and sharing with the Waco ISD, I think will help us move this along forward. I strongly believe in the why that this is a part of our plan and progress to do our best to ensure equitable growth. And so I appreciate these efforts. I thank staff for the legwork that has been put into this. This is going to be an ongoing conversation in how we develop and advance communities and neighborhoods. But I'm glad to see that, we're all on those pages. We're aligning our taxation partners in this effort, and we're moving forward for the betterment of our city as a whole.
I think this is also a really exciting moment for us to support our just robust arts community who has been significantly impacted by the financial weight of COVID-19. So I love seeing that Fiona Bond and Creative Waco is being brought to the table this early in the design, just to speak into it and for us to figure out which artisans we can compensate to create really beautiful work in the airport. I know a lot of us are really active on our various social media channels as a way to communicate information out to our residents. So love the idea of creating spaces that are so beautiful that our visitors instantly want to take photos and put them on social media. And then that just be a multiplier effect of other people wanting to come through Waco so they can get this iconic photo at the silos and an iconic photo at the Alico and an iconic photo on this gorgeous mural inside the airport. So this just makes me excited. And City Manager Ford, I appreciate you pushing pause on this to extend the timeline to create a product that is really what we're wanting to see. I love having Dr. Chief on the call. It just shows that when we slow down, we're able to really have the output and the outcome that's worthwhile.
This is Holmes. I don't want to pile on here, but I think it's a great idea to get Creative Waco involved in this for sure. Because as I saw the first drafts here on page 13, 12, 13, 14, I was thinking, wow, yeah, we're kind of missing what we were talking about as far as, when you get off in Denver, you got that mountainy feel. When you get off in Minneapolis, you got the kind of foresty feel. When you get off of LaGuardia, you got that hot dog vendor with the Brooklyn accent, make it memorable, make it, they want to come back to Waco. But anyway, I think everybody gets the idea. The first draft having Lake Waco in there, that is in District 5. So I do like that aspect, but maybe it's not quite capturing the entire feel of the city, but keep up the good work. Yeah, I appreciate taking another look at this and getting Fiona involved.
Thank you, council members. Our last IR on the agenda today is 2021-148, and it is a solid waste alley cleanup update. It documents our 18-year history of contracting with Goodwill for litter abatement near the landfill along Highway 84. Also, since 2009, Goodwill has helped us with alley cleanups, primarily in District 4, which hosts 64% of the city's alleys. The Goodwill contract, that contract's budgeted at $325,000 annually out of the solid waste fund, and currently cleans District 4 alleys multiple times a year. Staff, as outlined in the IR, proposes to modify Goodwill's program of work to allow alleys in the other council districts to receive a cleanup at least once a year, something that currently is not occurring. Staff, to help the council kind of see the financial picture here, did work with Goodwill to identify the costs associated with adding services to the Goodwill contract in the event the council wants to explore that.
I will open my big mouth again and thank you for this report. You know, I truly appreciate, while I'm grateful of the TLC that District 4 has received in their alleys, I'm grateful that some of that love is going to be shared with other districts in the city as well. And it's going to be done in a way where it's not going to cost the city anything extra at this moment. You know, as I've driven some of the alleys in District 2, so when you can't sleep at night and you're bored, you can drive through alleys and see what you find. You know, there are things as mattresses and sofas and toilets that I think after a while become a public safety issue, especially for our children that are playing in the backyards and alleyways. And so I'm appreciative that even once a year that all of our alleys in the city will be addressed. I'm even for, I mean, I know this is not up for a vote, but I would even say, you know, let's give it a year without increasing the cost to see how that goes first. And then after a year, once we have some data under our belt, if we decide that we needed up the number of times that each alley is visited throughout the year, I would definitely recommend that. But right now I think I'm at the starting point. I'm very grateful that some of the alleys that need much attention will be addressed over the next year.
Just to tail in on that though, you said a year. I want to maybe look at 6 months, because I think if it's something that they have, if it's chronic dumping, or you know, if you've got some areas that are just kind of hubs for that, you know, I think if you do a citywide pass through January, you know, when you get to June, maybe do one more and see where we are. If it doesn't need it, then you don't need it. But I think that the only way we can start at that point to analyze whether or not this is a troubled area, you know, for whatever reason, is it, you know, hidden off in a little corner and just a safe haven for illegal dumping. And I think you'd be able to know if you looked in a 6-month period rather than a 12-month period.
Yeah, I really appreciate that idea, Councilwoman Bearfield, to identify where these problem areas are. As the queen of Waco's alleys, with 64% of them in my district, I will say that even with this, there are just so many issues in alleys throughout D4. I mean, there are all the things that Mayor Pro Tem spoke of. There are toilets, there are couches, there are tires, there are mattresses, and there's just a lot of litter. And so there was a nice line that said essentially, should council wish to incur the additional expense, staff will pursue a contract amendment with Goodwill. I would love to see this increased fairly significantly, maybe having eyes on all of our alleys like once a month or every couple of months to identify where those problem issues are, and just to maintain a sense of cleanliness and public health and safety of our neighborhoods. But I also love the idea that this is getting extended out. These, in looking at the map, these are clearly in the core of the city. So having District 1 and District 2 really be grandfathered into this feels like an important decision at this point.
I'll go for it.
Dylan, you want me to go? I'll go first, let you go last. Yeah, this is a worthwhile project, and I like what we're doing here. It strikes me again looking at page 17, the map there. It's just, I mean, it shows it all. There's a lot of alleys there, and I still don't think a lot of citizens realize that the city is not maintaining those on a regular basis, and also that they are eligible for abandonment. That a citizen can, I guess, neighbors get together for a block, they can own that. They can own that alleyway. But again, it seems to me we're as Kelly said, we're kind of focusing on D4 here, but with the incremental costs, and again, I don't want to get we got to be careful with costs here, but to maybe increase the frequency instead of 3 times a year, maybe 5 times a year, and then just make it throw 1 and 2 in there also. Again, I don't want to impede the process of what we got going here. Let's go ahead and do it. But it would seem that we could add all of them in, and really in order to gather data for 6 months, 10 months, 12 months, and then come back, because I like the idea of a holistic campaign on alley abandonment. Hey, you can own this, and if you want to rebuild your fence, maybe we build an abatement somehow to help them rebuild the fence. Because I think in the long run it'll help the city. And as my council member, as the council members have already said, we don't want toilets and couches and mattresses and then trees and rats and all that. We don't want that. And I think if you put that in, gave that back to the citizens, they would and help them build the fence somehow. They would take ownership, and this seems like a win-win. But maybe we gather the data that we've got here and then build some kind of program in the next budget cycle. But yeah, I support what we're doing here.
I also support this. I think it's I really appreciate the in-depth look at this. I think it's something that we probably need to discuss at least on an annual basis as a council, if not every 6 months. And I support coming back on this in 6 months. But I just think having kind of council catch-ups on this issue is going to be important. I fully support, and I'm supportive of the goodwill contract and supportive of an expansion of that if that's what's necessary. But coupled with that, I think we do need to probably have some sort of marketing or PR campaign, because my understanding of this is that, and Jennifer speaking to this, while the city retains easements on the alleyways, technically it is the responsibility of the property owners to maintain their alleys. And so while I think that it's imperative for the city to strike this right balance of realistically knowing that some alleys are going to be overgrown and it's going to be a public health issue or a safety issue if we don't, so we need to take this on. But at the same time, we need to make sure that property, I was always surprised at, continue to be surprised how many people think that's exclusively the responsibility of the city to maintain that alleyway. And so particularly after we come through and clean them up, we need to say, hey, it's clean now, but y'all don't need to just mow your yard. You need to mow this as well. And you don't need to just weed eat your yard now. You need to weed eat this, because it is technically the responsibility of the property owner to maintain that alleyway. We need to be realistic, and we need to know that some alleys are going to get cluttered up, and we're going to need to participate in that. But it can't, I believe it just can't fall on the city exclusively for that. And a lot of that is just people don't know. Now, if you got a couple couches and a toilet in the back of your alley, I don't know that that's going to be easy for just the resident to clean up. So again, I think there is a balancing act and a information campaign that we can get behind to relieve some of that burden on the city. And I would just be interested in exploring too, if these alleys really aren't being used or utilized, and there is a, we'll need to retain for easement purposes, but do we need to abandon them? Is that something that we should, I don't know the backstory of why or why not, but if have in the past, since I've been on council anyway, clearly communicated to property owners that it's their responsibility to maintain that. Do we need to go through some formalized process with which to give them access to that, to where they can move their fence back if they want to? And some people can't and won't. So again, I think it's a balancing act, but I think it's worth exploring kind of what are best practices where you have an old part of the city that are whose alleyways are not being used for trash services any longer. What are some best practices to implement? And maybe the goodwill contract combined with the PR campaign of reminding people of their responsibility is it. But I would love to hear what other cities have kind of done in this moment if they've crossed that bridge too.
I think those are great. I think there's a good mix of a good follow-up that Assistant City Manager Paul Kane can work on to take the feedback and develop a program that encapsulates each of those comments. So I'll put that on our project list and we'll put it on the schedule for another update in the months ahead.
City Manager Ford, and one more thing, as we move along with that project, I would also like to explore, maybe as Mayor Meek brought up, of what other cities are doing. But, you know, I really have been enlightened that a lot of the trash that is in or that is in our different various alleys aren't even from the neighbors there. They're from people outside of the neighborhood that come there to dump, you know, and so I'm curious to see how other cities handle that. So as we begin this process, maybe that's one approach or one angle that we can look at it as well is what do we do in cases where it's not even the own people of the neighborhood trashing up the alley, but it's people maybe from other neighborhoods that are coming to this one because they don't want it in their own backyard.
Sure. Yeah. We will incorporate that as well. All right, that concludes the 4 IRs. We do have one public hearing on the agenda today. Clint Peters, our Director of Development Services, will review that here in a few moments as part of his work session review. Resolutions wise, we have 14, and I'd like to just briefly highlight a couple, 3 actually. The first 2 I'll highlight together. That's resolutions 161 and 162. Those 2 resolutions relate to the ratification of a recent purchase of a large-scale vaccination module from Luminaries Inc. This product is called Inoculate and was purchased for $209,500 to support our vaccine management program, really with a specific eye towards our vaccine clinics having significantly increased dosage in the future. Luminaries Module has several really key benefits that'll help the health district staff. First, the tool enables automated registration, qualification, and scheduling of vaccines. And that alone will eliminate a variety of manual processes that staff's having to undertake in the vaccine approach. And it'll also improve our record keeping and eliminate the need to have 2 separate information systems, a manual and an automated system. Luminaries also provides a direct interface with the state DISH's system, which will help in uploading required data to the state. All those benefits will help us run just even more efficient vaccine clinics at our current rate of dosages, and also really help us if we're able to bring in significantly higher amounts of dosage into McLennan County. And then finally, it's not just COVID-19 that will benefit from the Luminaries technology. Other vaccination programs at the health district will also benefit. And specifically to Resolution 162, I just wanted to show how we're really grateful to McLennan County for stepping up with financial support to implement this tool. They're funding half of the cost for Luminaries, and it really just shows their level of commitment at the county for public health, and that's on top of the staff that they provided to support our vaccination clinics. So really appreciate them stepping up and doing that.
This is Holmes. I'll just chime in on that too. Bradley, on 161 and 162, the 2 kind of our COVID prep resolutions, and kind of what I said in the IR there. Just being prepared. I mean, I like the fact that we're trying to prepare ourselves in large scale vaccinations, which I think that the Luminaries deal will help with, and then the software, the scheduling software, which I think will help with the equitable solution we're talking about, just keeping in order for the whole thing. I do like the fact that great partnership with McLennan County through this whole deal, and the judge and the commissioners there have been great to work with. And again, we just have to be ready on this deal, and I appreciate the work you're doing. Oh, the other aspect I want to hit is these are 1 and 2 year commitments, and it's not like we're getting, you know, a long-term solution to COVID, because hopefully it's just there'll be some follow-up things that happen too. But I like the way we're treating the short-term nature of the issue with the short-term expense that matches in the budget. But good work.
Thank you, Councilmember. The third and final resolution I wanted to highlight is 2021-163, which is documents our first quarter budget amendments. And typically this item might not get a mention in the manager's report, but today's version has several amendments that really are going to help the staff push forward on council priorities. Those amendments are outlined on agenda packet pages 152 to 156, and they document the city staff moving ahead on setting up a new stormwater division, as well as several critical information technology projects that'll really drive greater levels of communication with our residents. And I could probably spend an hour on each of the IT enterprise-wide solutions, but I won't. But each project really promotes streamlined processes and really enhance the ability of the city to move forward in a increasingly digital workspace. Things like single sign-on, firewall enhancements, enhanced internet connectivity will really drive us towards being a high-performing city government. A couple projects, though, I do think are worth spending a couple minutes on. Specifically, first is Neogov Insight, which is a recruiting management solution, and that relates to our human resources department system. Will help us not only be more agile in the hiring process, but it'll help us hire in an equitable way and really improve our abilities there. It'll enhance the experience of the applicants and also city staff. It allows for the ability to interact with applicants via text messages very quickly. And it can also automatically blind applicant information so that a person's name or basic information has no bearing on if an applicant moves forward in the hiring process, which should reduce any potential biases in the hiring process. The second acquisition I wanted to highlight was WebTrack e-commerce, which will really consolidate our online registration opportunities in a few departments, including golf, parks and rec, and a couple of others. That'll allow for online bookings of various facilities, as well as improved e-commerce functionality. And then lastly, the two of the biggies that I know the council has really asked us as a staff to lean into are a new website. That's included in the budget amendment. And then finally, funding for a robust citizen reporting tool, which will really make our government more responsive to our residents and businesses and visitors. Both those last two projects I'm excited about. I know y'all are, and they're actively being worked on and will roll out later in 2021. On the agenda today, ordinance-wise, we don't have any. So that's exciting. And if there's no further questions, that concludes my report.
Mayor and council, I do have an update on resolution 2021-157 on the election judges. I just wanted to let you know, I sent you an updated resolution that includes the list of the election workers. Council approved an election administration service agreement back in February that includes the county election office assisting us with recruiting, training, and payroll for our election workers. The rates of pay are included in the agenda. Those are set by the election administrator early on and agreed to by the joint governmental entities. And also the resolution amends the order of election to reduce the number of vote centers from 26 to 15 based on the various entities that canceled their elections. 12 governmental entities have canceled due to uncontested races. And there are no changes to the 5 early voting locations. And that's all I had.
Manager, sorry. I'll wait my turn.
No, it's okay. I'll go first. I'm going back to 164. The resolution about in-car cameras for the patrol cars. I think it's a good way to continue to improve our police force. And as I understand it, these integrate into the body worn camera system that we recently added to. And I don't know if Dr. Chief is still on, but I'm so happy that she'll be able to look at these items that we're getting in the police force too, fresh eyes and the latest technology and best practices, getting some of her ideas as well.
No, don't worry about it because it just slipped right out of there.
I'll give you some time to remember, Councilmember Bearfield. City Manager Ford, I did have a question on Resolution 165. Concerning the reimbursement to the city for the Waco Tourism Pit. Maybe I missed it, but I did not see an amount of what that looks like on a monthly basis. I don't know if it's a set fee or if it's a percentage. How does that work in it? And do we have an amount of what that would look like?
Let me ask Deidre Emerson to step in. I know she knows this probably more accurately than I do.
Yes, there is a set amount of $1,000 a month that will be provided as the administrative fee.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Deputy City Manager. The other thing I'm grateful about this resolution is allowing local banks to get involved, which I think is very, very important. And I think everyone on council would believe the importance of supporting local businesses, financial institutions, organizations, etc. And so I'm very excited that now they'll be able to be a part of the process as well. So thank you.
This is Holmes. I'll jump in on that one. Yeah, I'll echo Hector on that one, making sure that local banks got the right to work in this the TPID environment here too, I think is important. It's a good change to the doc.
I did remember. It was about the elections. You said we were going from what to what again? You're muted, ma'am. Still muted.
You're on mute.
Going from 23 vote centers to 15.
Okay.
Based on
okay. And I know we, as a city, for our uncontested races, they are no longer on the ballot.
Right.
Is that the case with like Waco ISD or all? I mean, or
yes, if they canceled their election and no longer on there, and let me look and see who canceled. Waco ISD is still contracting, so they're still.
Well, I know they have several seats, but I know one of them was uncontested, so I didn't know if that particular race, because see, just like ours, we have one that is contested and the others were not. So I didn't know if they fell off in the same manner.
They do. If it's done by the deadline, usually by the end of the filing period.
Yeah.
Then they are no longer on the ballot.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for staff? Are there any items council would like to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did have. Sorry. In that same manner, Esmeralda, speaking to you, I wondered if this was the opportunity, because I realized that the rate of pay for the judges and things has been the same for quite some time. And I don't know if that is a county thing that has to be run through the elections office, but I would like to see if we could consider a rate of pay increase for our judges and election workers. And let me tell you why. What we realized in COVID is that the majority of our election workers are retirees and elderly folk. And I think one of the reasons we may have issues with having someone serve as an election judge, because it is a very specific block of time. So if you're a full-time worker or even a part-time worker, is it worth me taking off my job to do that? So, or if I am a retiree or something, student even, if I have a decent living wage rate of pay, then that would incentivize me more to do so. So I just wonder, is that something that we can consider petitioning to the county courts?
Sounds like a wonderful idea, and I will definitely start working with our new election administrator to see what we can do and and how we can help incentivize election judge recruiting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Are there any items council would like to remove from the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, the consent agenda will include resolutions 2021-156 through 2021-169. I will now ask City Manager Bradley Ford to introduce the first work section.
Thanks, Mayor. This first one is work session 2021-149. It's a discussion of public hearing agenda items. Maybe that's not the right call. Anyway, it's Clint Peters joining us to give a presentation of our planning public hearing items. Clint, save me, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. We do have a light public hearing agenda for you tonight. We just have the one agenda item, subdivision plats, and we actually just have one plat. And so it's a final plat of the Oak Bluffs Edition, Phase 1. This is in our ETJ. This is a small residential subdivision out in the Chalk Bluff area of our ETJ off Golson Road, north of town. This phase just has 7 residential lots. And here's a little closer up view of it on Beverly Cox Road and Shady Lane. This is the overall approved preliminary plat that includes 22 lots. I would note that these lots are under the acre minimum size in the ETJ to have septic systems. This plat was approved before that ordinance change was adopted by the City Council back in September of 2020. So they can develop out to those standards under an acre. So the phase they're doing right now, Phase 1, is just the portion that's on the existing street, Beverly Cox Drive and Shady Lane. You can see the lots range in size from about ½ acre to a little over 0.8 of an acre. They are served by Chalk Bluff Water Supply Company, and then we'll have septic systems. As you can see here, they were required to dedicate some right of way to get 60 feet for these rural roads. And then there is an easement being dedicated for some detention pond that will serve the whole subdivision. And Plan Commission did recommend this for approval with no conditions.
Hey, Clint, quick question. Did you say that Plan and staff recommended this without any conditions?
So we did have conditions. They have met all the conditions, so it comes to you with a straight approval from Plan Commission.
So that has changed since the Plan Commission approved it. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah. So the way our ordinance works with the changes in the state law, when a plat comes to council, all the conditions have already been addressed, and the Plan Commission recommends approval. If there's additional conditions, if the Plan Commission recommends approval with conditions, it has to go back to the Plan Commission again until they meet all those conditions. So now plat, used to the council would approve plats or disapprove plats subject to conditions. Now, under the new state law and our ordinances, everything that comes to council will be with a straight approval with no conditions.
Okay, so as of right now, and this is approved as is, no conditions attached.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, sir.
All right. If there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and let Clint move into his second work session. We'll call it 2021-150, and it's discussion of potential residential design standards. Clint, why don't you move forward on that one?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council again. Let me make sure I pull up the right presentation. We did want to bring a discussion item to you on residential design standards. This is an item that staff has been working on and has it included in our overall rewrite of our zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance. But with recent emphasis on development, especially infill development that's occurred over the last 6 months to a year, we felt like that we needed to prioritize this and move up the residential design standards a little bit ahead of the overall rewrite. So we wanted to talk to you about that and get your feedback on it, and then potentially bring back some ordinances on residential design standards in the next upcoming months. So as a planner and a planning background, I always got to start conversations with our comprehensive plan and what it recommends. The comprehensive plan, City Plan 2040, was adopted by the City Council about 5 years ago, back in 2016. And it's got multiple goals and objectives that talk about, design standards and how important it is to vitality of our city as it grows and redevelops and develops. And so wanted to go through a couple of those briefly and then go into the standards that we're looking at. So the first one you can see there is the growth management section, goal 2. And it's got an objective to develop strategies to address and reverse deterioration within our transitional neighborhoods and to maintain and preserve stable neighborhoods. So, I think part of that is prioritizing code compliance, and I know that's been a big priority of the City Council. But also, making sure that as properties redevelop or develop, that they have the good design and they're compatible with our existing neighborhoods. Our next section is dealing with housing, and you can see in there I've highlighted compatible infill development, compatible with the neighborhood. That's a big theme through our housing section. The first one being preserve and stabilize existing neighborhoods with compatible infill development through the promotion of initiatives and incentives to encourage that. So I think design standards is included that, and some of what we're doing actually with the IR that was in this packet with the property management program also meets this objective. And then with our affordable housing stock, with our infill development, that it needs to be architecturally compatible with the neighborhoods, as you see that in 5.09. And then lastly, in goal 6, our community livability section, it talks about strengthening urban design standards, from enhance the visual appeal of our city streetscape. And in my opinion, the streetscape starts at the building facade. So that's the public realm. So good design is where our streetscape starts. And so I think that's, part of this recommendation is to make sure that we have good design all the way from our facades, out to the streets. So with that in mind, some of the concepts we're looking at are to ensure that infill development does not negatively impact the existing character and development patterns in a neighborhood by requiring compatibility standards such as building scale, massing, architectural features that are consistent with the surrounding area, and with good design practices. While also, limiting the effects of, having repetition or uniformity of development by requiring variation and diversity in our front elevations within certain lot patterns and new development. And you can look at those two things and you can think, well, they're a little bit inconsistent with each other, because in one you're saying, well, they need to all kind of look the same, while the other one's saying, well, they all need to look different. But I think the difference is there. That first one is really dealing with the form of the development, the massing of it, how it fits in with the area, while having that diversity of architecture within that. So I think when you drive around Waco, I think that's one of the neat things about Waco that makes it unique, is that we don't have just one style of architecture in Waco. We have a lot of diversity in our housing stock. So having that diversity is important, but still maintaining that compatible form, in a neighborhood. And so we'll get into those, what makes that standards meet these two concepts. I did want to mention that there was a bill passed by the legislature last session, House Bill 2439, which is known as the Materials Bill, which does limit cities' ability to require specific building materials as part of design standards. And so we can't, for example, we can't require masonry facades or certain types of materials, but we can have requirement for form. And we do have, not citywide, but we do have some of these standards already baked into some of our zoning ordinance with some of our overlays. Our college and university neighborhood district around Baylor University has some of these standards in it. We also have our small lot, single family ordinance that requires some of these design standards in it. And then one that we just adopted probably about 2 years ago was the repurposed shipping containers, where people have used old shipping containers and turned them into homes. We have design standards on those. So I think using some of these same design standards that we've already used in specific locations, I think we feel like it's time to move forward and have that, citywide.
Clint, can I ask you a quick question on HB 2439?
Sure.
Do you know, or does anybody on city staff know if there's clarification that's being sought from this bill? I recall some TML or a lobbyist telling us after the last legislative session that actually had a different, this result that we're applying here was actually an unintended consequence. At least that's what was reported to us by one of the, whoever gave the presentation from the legislative update, that they were actually trying to achieve something different from that. I don't recall exactly what it was, but this was not actually what they were trying to do. And so I'd be curious to see how other cities have interpreted that, given that legislative history, and if there's any clarification that's being sought or that should be sought on this matter in this legislative session. I could be wrong, but I really think that I remember clearly someone presenting to us that it was actually something different that the state legislature was trying to accomplish when they were trying to prohibit cities requiring building materials.
Mayor, and you are correct that the way the bill writes is that it talks about materials that are allowed in the building code. You can't, if they're allowed in the building code, you can't prohibit them. And I think my understanding, some of the beginnings of that legislation might have been dealing with the type of piping that you use for plumbing, that you don't prohibit a certain type of material used for plumbing. But the way it's written, a lot of cities and municipalities have looked at it. What it talks about, any material that's allowed in the building code, so you can't prohibit. So, that's been interpreted to go out to the facades of the buildings too, the materials on the facade. But we can look in that a little closer to make sure, that's not being interpreted incorrectly.
And again, I think to the larger point is we're in session right now. So if we need to get the legislature to clarify that, then let's get our lobbyist to go and run with this and try to provide some clarity for what might have been an unintended consequence.
Sure, we'll check into that. So I'll run through a couple of slides of kind of what these concepts are designed to accomplish. The first one being building scale and massing. Again, that form of the residential unit and how it matches up or is compatible with the neighborhood that it's being built in. So having similar form characteristics to other homes in the block. And like I said earlier, we've already incorporated in some of these other ordinances that we have on specific types of development. But the items that we're looking at are building location on the lot. So that, that would be how far a building setbacks or how close it is to the street. The height of the building, our ordinance in residential zoning allows up to 35 feet, but you can have, single family or a single story versus 2-story, and those could be incompatible with each other. The widths of the building, how they sit on the lot, how wide they are, and then roof pitches. And so you can see that top example, where you have small single family homes, 1-story, and then you have a real large 2-story home, and you kind of see how that gets out of scale in a neighborhood. And it can be the other direction too. You could have homes that are larger and then a smaller home be built, and that messes with the compatibility and character of a neighborhood. And then on that bottom slide is a good example of that, where you see new construction, and really it's almost hard to tell which one was the new construction on this, but it's the middle house where they built new construction where it's compatible with the size and setbacks of the homes and the block. So it blends in well with the rest of the houses in the block. Similar with that is parking. That's a big, has a big impact on aesthetics of a neighborhood and character in their neighborhood and where it's located. And so one of the things that we did with the college and university neighborhood overlay is require that parking be either behind the residential structure or on the side of it. And so with no garage, the recommendation would be to have that parking in behind or in front or on the side of the building. So you can see on the top where, the parking's all in front of it. Our current ordinance does allow you to pave up to 75% of that front yard. Our recommendation would be to lower that. So you would just have up to 50% just to keep that residential character of it. When you have a lot of parking in the front, not only does it not look good, but it does, create a less walkable neighborhood because you have cars everywhere and can create safety issues. And so that top picture is a picture, where you have it in the front. And our recommendation would be that it would be on the side or in the rear of the house. And example of that is that bottom picture where you have, you don't have a garage, but you do have a driveway where it goes all the way behind the house where you can pull your car up and it's not sticking out in front of the house. There may need to be exceptions to that rule. If the standards in that previous slide, if you're having to meet the form standards of that and it doesn't allow, and you don't have an alley, but you have a narrow lot, and it doesn't allow you to get the parking in the side of the rear, there may need to be some exceptions to that. We're still looking at that. But either way, we do feel like that the current standard of 75% paving in the front yard needs to be lowered to 50%. Where we do, this proposal does not require garages, but where you do have garages, that also has a big impact on that public realm or facade, the way it looks. And so that top picture shows where you have all front load garages, and that's the prominent architectural element of a home, and it really does detract from the character of neighborhood. So where you do have where you can have the side load garages, they need to have architectural elements on the facade. So this bottom right picture, it shows a side load garage, but the front of the house, where the garage is, just looks like a normal part of the facade of the home. And then where you do need to have front load garages, it needs to be part of. It doesn't need to be the main architectural feature of the home. So no more than 50%, comprise no more than 50% of the front facade, and doesn't protrude out in front of the home more than 10 feet. So this is an example there where where the garage is less than 50% of the front facade, and then it's even with the rest of the home. So it blends into the architectural design of the home. And then talking about building architectural elements, we want to, again, this is an example that we already have in our college and university overlay district, but avoid expansive blank facades through the inclusion of design elements, architectural elements. And so that top picture, you can see this is a single family home and it is brick, but it's just a blank facade. There's really no design elements to it. So a lot of cities will use kind of a laundry list of items, architectural features, and require, that new construction have 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 of these elements included in it, and those could be articulation of or building offsets where you would have some relief in the front facade, where you would have some offset to it, where it would just be a straight across facade. You could have bay windows, stoops, porches, chimneys, structural windows, awnings, roof dormers, columns, overhangs, and then raised pier and beam foundations. And so the bottom example, you can see they've included several elements like that. They have the roof dormers, they have the front porch and the columns, but they've also included, you know, a raised foundation to give it that pier and beam look, which a lot of our older neighborhoods have. So including those design elements in there really makes a difference in the way things, homes look from the facade. And then the last item would be that that variation of elevations. And really, you think about this more in a greenfield application where you're having new development, but you can also, you know, we have parts of our core city where you have, you know, potentially a block that's completely vacant. So you could have, you know, numerous homes being built at one time, and having that variety. You know, you have similar form that we talked about, but you have the variety in the elevations. And so, and you can see an example where all the houses look exactly alike all the way down the street. And, you know, for long term, that doesn't, for neighborhood stability, that's just not very good. So having some requirements in there that you have variations in the roof lines and the roof pitches, still meeting that form, but, you know, having some uniqueness to each home, especially in a block face. And so this little diagram down here shows that, you know, the subject property, those gray areas, you couldn't have the exact same facade. You could have the same floor plan, you know, the same square footage in the home, but the facades would need to be varied. And this little example down here shows, you know, the same building size, same floor plan, but, you know, a different, little bit unique architectural element. So having that variety does help with neighborhood stability long term. Next steps, you know, once we get some feedback from City Council, we'll put these concepts into a draft ordinance form, you know, through the rest of March, and then start with some stakeholders input with our developers group that meets monthly, and then our neighborhood associations. We actually gave a preview of this presentation to Brook Oaks last night and got some initial feedback, and we'll be going back with them in April, and then reaching out to other neighborhood associations to get feedback in March and April. And then bring this to the Plan Commission and City Council, this ordinance, the Plan Commission and City Council for public hearings in April and May. And with that, we'll open it up for any comments or questions or discussion.
Any discussion or any questions for Clint?
Clint, this is Kelly. I have a question about the percentage that was being proposed from the 75% of the front of the house down to 50. 50 still feels like a lot of cement, or a lot of, basically a lot of cement for the front of the house. So I'm curious how you are landing on 50%, and if you think that number should potentially be even lower.
We can look at that. I mean, that's something we can look at. Most cities have that requirement, so we can do a little bit more analysis on that to see kind of what, you know, an average is. There really wasn't any, you know, magic reason to go from 75 to 50. It was just, you know, looking at maybe reducing it to 50. But we can look at that for sure and see if that is kind of a standard, you know, requirement.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Hey, Clint, this is Hector. Quick question for you. About a year and a half ago or a year ago, we had an extensive conversation about container homes here in the core of the city and city limits. With this new proposal or suggestion, how would that affect container homes?
So we did, we had you're correct, we did have a discussion on that, and we also adopted an ordinance with a lot of these, especially the form-based requirements. So that,
yes, sir.
That's already in place in the ordinance. And so this would just, you know, this would apply some of those same standards that we applied to the container homes across the board to all development. So it wouldn't change anything with the container homes.
Okay, but I guess the amount of response, I shouldn't say the line of expectation is not less than what we have for container homes, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Clint, this Holmes, great presentation, and I appreciate you picking this up, and just in an effort to update our design standards as Waco is growing, you know, quickly, and housing costs raise, and I'm just to get this tracked and to get the dialogue with the developers, to get their feedback too, as we kind of try to pin something down here over the next couple of months, I think is great. But anyway, good initial work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Clint, pardon my poor listening skills or just a little bit of ignorance on the front end. Again, thank you for a great presentation. But my question is, would this apply to all new home construction in Waco, or is this more targeted at the infill? I apologize for not picking up on that.
It would be across the board. It would have more impact on infill development, just because a lot of the compatibility standards, are geared towards what's around it. So it would be citywide, but it would, and you do see a lot of, I won't say all, but a lot of the new, greenfield development already meeting these standards, especially the compatibility and form standards. I think the variation standards are geared more towards greenfield development, but to answer your question, these would apply citywide for new development.
Okay, that makes sense. And did you say that a lot of these proposals are already incorporated in areas such as the university overlay? And
that's correct. Yeah, a lot of these design standards were using specific applications, and this would just broaden it out to include all residential development.
Because I believe that overlay changes that this council approved a while ago have really beautified many of those new buildings and areas around campus. So this is promising.
That's correct. You can because it's been in place for several years, more than 5 years. My timeline gets mixed up, but it's been a while. You can drive around Baylor campus and you can see the difference. It's pretty stark, and what's developed under the new rules versus what's developed under the old rules.
Anyone else? I'll go then. I really appreciate this. We want to build neighborhoods that are built to last, that 70 years from now are going to be healthy. And that includes infill and that includes greenfield, but both we need to have put our long-term goggles on and make sure that we're going to have neighborhood residential areas that we're proud of. Clint, this might be in the form of an IR or another update down the road. But that first slide of your presentation where you talked about the city plan and kind of some goals that look, things like lighting, streetscapes, things that we're doing to incentivize redevelopment and healthy revitalization in the core of the city. I'd like an update on what we're doing on some of that, particularly on the public side of that, if that makes sense. And so, everything that city plan calls out, I'm tracking with, and I'm like, yes, this plan is right on. I support that, but I would love to know what we're actually doing in terms of carrots or sticks on the public spaces place side of things, or what we should be doing even as the city on the public spaces side of things as well. This is also another future agenda item, but it might be worth revisiting the shipping container discussion, because personally, I've not seen a successful one in Waco yet, but that's me being maybe a little biased on that. So might want to get an update on that. Or at least I would want one. On the scale of size compatibility, is there any special exceptions to that? Because I have seen neighborhoods where there's big and small homes that kind of flow together nicely, and that are all kind of similarly have similar characteristics, but the sizes aren't matching up. And so I didn't know if there was a special provision to where, there's some unintended consequence that we don't want to prohibit that from happening. I'm even thinking about Floyd Casey and some of the discussions we've had about that, and how there is kind of going to be this village feel to it of houses of different sizes, but kind of are built with a master design eye and a master plan in place. So I'm just curious if I don't have an issue with that requirement, but just wondering if there's any sort of special exception that might be made available for, new construction that it might actually benefit the neighborhood. But they're prohibited because of this restriction or something.
Yeah, we'll look at that closer. I mean, because I do agree there are, and again, I mean, I think that's part of our Waco charm is that we have such unique architecture, and you do have a mix. You have neighborhoods that have mixes of, both large and small homes, and it all works together. The way that we've worked this on some of the overlays is that it really the 20% varied from the size or the form really just be in that block phase. So you could, if you go to the next block, you could have a row of small homes and a row of big homes on the next block. But we'll look at that. It is an average of the block, so it does give you a little bit of flexibility where you can have that as long as you get that 20% for the whole block, and then always we have a variance process if somebody wants to ask to.
I think that's
public hearing, so adjacent owners can give their feedback. Like, yeah, we think this is okay. So there's always that availability built into our ordinances.
Yeah, I think that's important. That variance process could be important. I think of like driving down Colcord, and I could be totally wrong about this in my head, but in my head, I think of these big, grand, historic homes, and then these kind of like quaint cottages that are next to them, and it all still flows very beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not shocked by the differentiation between the houses, and the character somehow still matches. But so I would hate for a block like that to be able to be developed. So again, I know there's a variance process in place, but just a thought there.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. You can, and that's why we didn't get into minimum square footages, because you can have, especially if you have, some of those examples I showed, the one with just the brick facade, that's over a 2,500 square foot home, and the good example was less than 1,200 square feet. But a lot of it is the architectural elements that are included that make the difference. So that's a good point.
I would agree also with Councilmember Palmer. 50% seems high to me, so I think that it's reasonable to allow someone to park one car in front of their house, but I would try to reduce that as much as possible. Just again, less concrete in the front of a house. I mean, there's ways to do that architecturally nice. I'm thinking about even Councilmember Bearfield, who's got a beautiful circle drive.
Yeah.
But I think that the examples in my head of like the Baylor lots where you're just like, they just pave the whole front yard and then you can stack cars in there. That's not, I think, what we're going for. So I'm great with agree with Councilmember Palmer with the reduction there. Garage, kind of same thought, is to me as little as reasonable. I can't remember what exactly the percent, maybe 50% was the garage rule as well, Clint.
That's correct.
And I just think, whatever is little as is reasonable, the better, I think. So I'd push on that a little bit personally. On the blank facade one, I don't know if one of the other requirements could be like just a percentage, stick a percentage of non-blank facade into it as well, so that you don't have like all of the, like, if you required some of those elements and they all like are crammed in on one side and then you still have a big blank facade. But again, kind of getting in the weeds here, but just another idea. I didn't know if, one thing we might consider too are landscaping grants, or if there's someone if there is some sort of way, I don't know that the city should pay for this, but if there are, grants available for planting trees, or if there are grants available for, landscaping or something like that, I think that might be something when you look at sustainable neighborhoods. I think that, again, when you're looking at some of those pictures of what not to do, that have that more suburban feel where there's just not a tree in sight. It's just like, man, that doesn't give me comfort that this is going to be built to last in the long haul. And I know that maybe there's a funding source available out there. I'm not saying we should eat that cost, but I'd be curious to know. Go.
Is Keep Waco Beautiful a nonprofit or is it city funded?
Well,
It's a nonprofit that receives city funds.
So they are an entity that could then fund the efforts that you speak.
that's right. I would be very curious about a partnership with them for some of these, and maybe even just I don't know. I would just be interested in exploring that. Exactly. Thank you, Councilmember.
Sir, may I add? I want to clarify what your request was, and I'm sorry if it wasn't you, if it was someone else. In reference to the going back to the 2040 plan.
Yep, that was me.
May I also add, as we're approaching its 5th year of existence, that if that's not what you said, may I add that, maybe it's time for an assessment to see where we are and what's still relevant, or what changes need to be made. I know that's a big haul, because it is a wonderfully tremendous document, and a lot of it. But I do think it's time for us at 5 years to look at it, to see, because Waco's changed in 5 years. So in the direction that it took to create that in 2016, are we still in the place where that's relevant?
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Councilman Barefield, I think you've read your plan, because it actually states in there that we're supposed to do a 5-year look back at it. So, very good.
I did indeed read that plan.
I think, that's everything. Clint, I guess my last question was, were there any other elements to the university overlay that you were like, maybe we should do this, but we're not going to do it because we don't want to? Like, anything else on the university overlay part that you thought about putting in there and didn't?
So the big elements in that overlay were, the parking was probably the biggest, getting the parking out in front of the structures, the architectural elements, and then some screening requirements from lesser intense uses where you had some existing neighborhoods there, or if you're building an apartment complex or a duplex next to a single family house, requiring some screening requirements. We could look at that. I don't think those really apply to here, because these standards are really dealing with all single family and potentially duplexes as well. So they're already similar in nature and use, where you in the overlay where you can have more intense uses adjacent to single family. But we'll look through there and see if there's anything that makes sense to include in these design standards.
And
I didn't miss anything.
I think this is great, and I think future agenda item for me would be to have a conversation about our downtown overlay and having similar conversations about that as well.
Okay.
That's all for me. Anybody else? Clint, thanks. Great presentation.
Thank y'all.
All right, Bradley, what's next?
All right, we have work session 2021-151, which is a discussion of our first quarter financials for FY 2020-2021. We are joined by Paul Diaz, our budget manager, who will be leading the presentation.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, sir, and thank you all. Let me get this set up. All right, can you see that presentation? Okay, good deal. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This presentation is to go over the first quarter financials. Before we start, I wanted to make a note of a few items. First, this first quarter report has the longest gap from when we actually close the period to when we update council. Now, this is due to staff resources that are required to go through the year-end process and the budget audit process. So as we move in and do the second, third, and fourth quarter reports, there will be a shorter reporting time frame. The other thing I wanted to note is that these financials are as of December 31st. However, there is some non-financial information like visits at the zoo or rounds at the golf course that we did update the presentation with so that you had the latest data. The goal of this report is to provide council and the public a comparison for the current year budget of where we're at, but also a look back and a comparison of where we're at the same period last year. Oops, sorry. And then lastly, when meaningful, we want to highlight the impact COVID has had. And so to do this, we'll show you a comparison of a normal year of a COVID year and then of the current year. So to begin, let's start with the general fund revenues. And this news is very positive. Operating revenues through the first period total $43.4 million, or 32% of the total budget. This is ahead of the FY20's pace relative to budget. The largest revenue stream in the fund is property tax. Now, typically that is received in the January and February timeframes. So you'll see that figure shoot up in the second quarter report. Business fees are at 27% of the budgeted revenue. This is great in and of itself, but when you consider that this budgeted revenue is about 10% higher than we budgeted last year. So we're ahead of pace and we had a higher budget. This is also similar story with our license and permits. Currently, we sit at 44% of budget, only a quarter through the year. This segment also was budgeted about $400,000 higher than last year. And then finally, in the general fund revenues, I wanted to highlight sales tax, as that's another positive story for the city. Sales tax we received through the period total just under $11 million, or 30% of budget. This is ahead of our FY20's pace relative to budget. And while the financials are only through December 31st, we did receive the sales tax numbers just before the posting. So we have included those in January. And you can see really great news. We were up almost 10% from where we were at January of last year. Now, while it's early in our forecasting models, our models do have us finishing well above budget. And right now, the three main models are right within that 41.5 and 42.5 amount. That's about a percentage gap of about 2%. We anticipate that as we get into the fiscal year, that gap is going to close down and hopefully settle in consistent across all of the models. Moving on to the expenses in the general fund, operating revenues through the period total $34.5 million, or about 25.5% of the operating budget. Salaries and benefits are at 21% of the budget. You'll notice maintenance and supplies are at 35 and 37% of the budget. And this is due because when we report actuals, we include actuals and encumbrances. This is pretty normal in a first quarter report, that you'll see those two segments a little bit higher than the year-to-date budget, just because they include encumbrances. When we account for that, overall general fund expenses are right in line with the budget at this point in the fiscal year. Moving on to the water utility.
I had one quick question, Paul, on the previous slide. I'm sorry, you already flipped back. Go to the next slide.
The expense side?
We were talking about general fund. Yeah, I couldn't. Where you've got I was not matching the comments. Operating expenses period total 34.5, and I was looking at operating. It looks like it's 27.9. Am I right? Or where do we get 34.5 in the comment?
It's going to be the combination of these two to get the 34.
Good. You're adding the encumbrances in as well. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm with you. Okay, now I'm back on track, because then I was going year over year directly to last year, and last year's information includes the encumbrance. Okay, that's all in. I'm with you now. Okay.
Great.
Hey, as long as we're going back, can you go back one more to, because you'd mentioned the better, the improvement in licenses and permits. Is that, because I know we went through a lot of review on better fitting some of these fees to the actual cost of the service, and is that part of that, or was that just sort of because we were up quite a bit in licenses and permits?
I think it's a combination of all of those aspects, whether it's changes in the fee adjustment, but also just the raw numbers of how many folks are moving here. That was one of the things that, as we talked with the bond rating agencies last month, that they were really impressed with of the number of permits, and it's a growing community.
Thanks, Paul.
Moving on to the utility funds, water, wastewater, and the WMARS revenues through the period are at 23 24 and 25% relatively. We did go back and look at September's because we saw October's numbers were a little bit lower than we had expected. And that's because we had a wet September, and there's a high correlation between the weather and the water revenue. So year-to-date revenues are down relative to where we were in FY20. And currently we're at 23% of the budget. This is slightly behind the pace of the budget last year. But with that said, as y'all are aware, water revenues do tend to be heavily seasonal and skewed towards the spring and summer months. So we feel that that's in a pretty good shape, but obviously we'll continue to monitor that. On the expense side, water operations and water operation expenses and encumbrances total 29.8% through the period. Again, this is normal and has to do with the encumbrances, particularly in the supplies and chemicals segment. Wastewater and WMARS are at 23% of expenses budget at this point, and WMARS is at 18% of the operating budget. So they're still below their year-to-date budget. Moving on to the solid waste fund, revenues through the period total 25.4% of budget, and they strongly mirror last year's pace. You can see there in our charges for service, there's only a variance of $2,000 on nearly 5.3. So consistency in the solid waste fund for sure. Operating expenses through the period total $5.5 million or 35.6% of budget. But much like with the utility funds, this is largely driven by encumbrances that will be liquidated through the fiscal year, and we'll bring those percentages back in line when we get to the second quarter. There are a couple of funds that we're monitoring closely just because of the impact of COVID. So first, let's start with the Convention Services Fund. Operational revenues are at 15% of budget through the first quarter. As you're aware, their primary revenue stream is hot tax, and through the period, they're only at 18% of the budget. Now, this is down when you compare it to FY20. Through the first quarter of FY21, we were at 26.2% of the budget. To kind of put that in perspective, we wanted to show you this slide of hot tax by month for the last 3 years. Prior to COVID, what we had seen was folks were coming to Waco and spending the night, and we saw increase over increase in our revenue. So you see a little bit of that with the 19 numbers and the 20 numbers. And then you see, the seasonality where most folks stay, go on vacation in the spring and summer. And so what we're monitoring is we're starting to return closer to that FY 2019 level. And then hopefully as more folks get vaccinated and we return to normal, we'll see it kind of trend back to what we saw in FY 19 and FY 20. The other fund that we're watching closely is the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame. Visits continue to lag behind what we saw in 19 and 20. All operational revenue is at 17.5% of the budget through the first quarter. Now staff will the biggest part of that is their visit revenue. Visit revenue is only at 13% of budget through the quarter. Staff will continue to monitor the health of this fund. The general fund does support this fund, and currently that's budgeted at $707,000. As we move forward into the second quarter and third quarter reports, and definitely as part of our budget discussions for the FY22 development, we'll continue to monitor this and see if there's extra, if additional general fund support will be needed for this fund. And then lastly,
Paul, before you go on, regarding the Ranger Hall of Fame, will we be able to, I'm not sure how we can forecast that before it's time to set the upcoming budget to know if there would be general fund support needed, or is that something that we will just have to amend as we move through?
I think what we could do is run different scenarios and kind of give the parameters of what we would need to do. But I think your last comment of amending maybe later in the year would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
And then the last part I wanted to highlight is a couple of funds that we're starting to see some good news, some return to normal, and those are the golf course and the zoo. Operational revenues through the first quarter At the golf course, they're at 23.1% of the budget. Now, this is an increase of about 7% from last quarter in FY 2020. As you can see from the graph, the number of rounds mirror the pre-COVID levels. You do see a dip in February's numbers, and this is due to the winter storm. You'll also see a similar dip in the zoo fund as well. Operational expenses through the period total $813,000, or about 31% of budget. This is a combination of actuals as well as encumbrances. Once you account for those, we think they're right in line with their year-to-date budget. And then finally, there's good news at the zoo. Operating revenues through the first quarter total 34.6% of their budget. Through the first quarter of last year, operating revenues were only at 15% of budget. So we're outpacing where we were at last year. Current year, their collections are really strong. Their two largest revenue streams are beating what they did last year, and their expenses continue to be below their year-to-date budget. So in summary, Mayor and Council, general fund sales tax collections are strong and expenses are in line with the year-to-date budgets. The utility funds, 3 water funds, and the solid waste funds are right in line with the year-to-date budgets. And after accounting for those encumbrances, operational budgets are at or below budget. We will continue to monitor the convention fund, as well as the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame, as they may have, they may need additional support from the general fund. And then good news at the zoo and the golf course. We're seeing strong numbers in terms of attendance that mirror the pre-COVID levels. And just a preview for the second quarter, we'll have a better understanding of the full impact of the winter storm impact, and then continue the discussion about possible general fund transfers to other funds if needed. And with that, Mayor, I'll be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Any questions for Paul?
This is Holmes. Great report, Paul. I like the flow of how this thing flows. It's a nice report. I like the fact that we're including year over year now a little more prominently in the report, because I think that's a very important aspect to look at. And the numbers are good. I mean, the year over year stuff is kind of right on, right in budget, really across the board. And I like the focus on the general fund and those large utility funds, which is like 95% of the budget anyway, I think. And then the special reports, I'm talking about the quality of the report first before I get into the numbers, Paul, because it's so good looking. And then the special reports on the CVB and Ranger Hall of Fame and zoo and golf course, which is kind of, some of the public amenities that the city runs. I think it's important for the council and really citizens to know, what the attendance factors, I think, and how that drives revenue, and how you can just see seasonality. You can see the effects of Snowmageddon. You can see the effects of COVID in the numbers. I'm really I'm pleased to see the zoo and the golf course. I mean, because it doesn't look like the golf course slowed down, except for the weather we had last month, and the zoo as well, as you pointed out. Ranger Hall of Fame, there's so many challenges there with the I-35 construction, in addition to COVID restrictions, and Byron's doing a great job over there. We just got to get normalized here, hopefully second, third quarter. CVB, as you say, we got to maybe start looking at that. It's just not. I'm very confident that by the third quarter it'll be back on track and generating revenue, but we got to figure out how to bridge till we get there, certainly. And you're spot on your analysis. I think that's all I had. Where you talk about in the summary, just your very last point, second quarter preview, full impact of winter storm. And I don't know if we have an idea, because I know there was a lot, the storm came and left us with a lot of repair, road repair, street repair, water line repair. And are we starting to get some numbers rounded up on, because that's obviously going to shoot a lot higher than what we had budgeted for on just extraordinary repairs. But I'm kind of anxious to see how that's ferreting out here in the second quarter. But yeah, great report. Great report.
I was just going to say, we in our system we're able to tag a project code on that, and so we were able to do that with the winter storm. So it should be that information, once we have it all in, should be pretty easy to pull.
Thanks.
Paul, Paul, this is Kelly. Just to echo what Councilmember Holmes says, these are beautiful documents that you created. I really appreciate being able to see year to date where we are versus budget versus year to date in the previous year, particularly with just the economic upheaval of COVID. This was really helpful to orient me as a new council member to this. So thanks for all of your hard work on this. I'd be curious to know what the zoo and the golf course are doing along marketing lines, and see if we can kind of copy and paste any of that along the Texas Ranger or any of our other entities that aren't seeing the pre-COVID funds mirroring what they are now. So, I mean, the golf course and the zoo look like they're thriving, which is fantastic. So I wonder if there are any lessons that we can learn there that we can then shift to other parts in the city machine. But this is really great work. So thanks so much for both the summaries and the context you provided, as well as really clear documents.
Hey, Paul, thank you again. As my fellow council members have said, this presentation is wonderful. Not only the presentation, but the information in the presentation. It is very much great news and comes at a very appropriate time. I love to see that operating revenues are up 33% to budget. I love to see that sales tax are up 30%. Sales tax revenue is up 30% to budget. I want to commend City Manager Ford and his staff for keeping our expenses in line with the budget. I know they've been keeping a very close eye on expenses. Question for you. One thing that you said that really caught my attention was that out of our operating revenues, that property tax revenue was a big part of that came in December, where we usually see that in January and February. What do you think? Why do you think this year or this past year was different?
So just in my experience, you'll typically see a majority of your property tax revenue coming in January and February. Mm-hmm. This is a new tax collector assessor. For me, this is first round, so there may be some of that, but just historically, that's where you see it. And usually by the second quarter, when we present to council, you're at 95% of what you budgeted.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. And I do appreciate the honesty about where we're currently at with the Convention Center and Texas Ranger Hall of Fame. I do believe that, COVID has played a major role. Obviously, we know that COVID has played a major role and impacted those two departments very heavily. Councilmember Palmer, I think part of, I would say, of your question is that I think because the golf courses and the Cameron Park Zoo are out in the open, they make people a little bit more comfortable attending those entities rather than an event at the Convention Center or the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame where they're both enclosed. But even so, to see activity still going on and picking up again, I'm very grateful for that. And so as we continue to keep a close eye, I want to I really appreciated Councilmember Barefield's comments about, should we amend the budget for these two entities later on down the road? Because even though we are seeing a turnaround, I still think that we still have some tough months ahead of us with those two entities, and nothing that they're doing on their part. I mean, it's just a byproduct of the pandemic we're experiencing right now. And so thank you again, once again, for the presentation.
Thanks, Paul. Any other questions for Paul? Comments? Appreciate this. This is good information.
All right. Our last staff work session of the afternoon is work session 2021-152, which is a discussion of code compliance personnel, scope of duties, and priorities. And I'm going to ask Interim Director of Community Services, Rainisha Hudnall, to introduce our presenter.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, Community Services will be providing a code compliance update to include changes made and those that are in progress with inside the division. One of those updates includes James Triplett, our new code compliance manager, who will be presenting today. He comes to the City of Waco with 20 years of experience in code compliance and program development, and as well as implementation. And with that being said, I'll hand it off to James to provide our update.
Thank you, Renisha. My video has been locked by the host. Would you mind unlocking it for me?
Sorry about that. Let me unlock you. How's that?
Perfect. That was my fault anyways, because I had the video going at the very beginning. So thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm James Triplett. I'll be giving you the code compliance update for today. Let me just get this started for you. Okay. Okay. The presentation is going to have four main topics. Of course, we're opening up for questions at the end. We're going to be going over the quick budget, short personnel overview, some of the top issues that we face and the changes that were made and are currently in process to face those top issues, and what some of our next steps are planned moving forward. Our budget for 2021 is about $930,000 estimated at that, with about $250,000 coming from the community development block grant funding. This encompasses 14 employees, which is 10 code officers, 2 senior development center representatives, 1 supervisor, and of course my position. This is to include a wide range of certifications, both state-based and international code council based. Those top issues previously mentioned were up until 2019, with the population growth of 9.68 from 2010 to 2018. This was served by 7 code officers. City Council in 2019 graciously allocated funding to allow for the addition of additional staff, which we now have the 10 code officers and of course my position. With that staff, one of the things that we try to do is educate owners and residents on what constitutes a true code violation versus those marginal issues that don't elevate to the level of an offense. I will say that the paradigm has changed over the years, and code compliance across the board for many places has gotten away from enforcement more towards education and just trying to get residents to comply. So even when an issue doesn't elevate to an offense, we find that we get a lot of compliance just by being nice and saying please and asking nicely, and that tends to get a lot of things resolved. And so that has been a shift for us. Now, don't get me wrong, enforcement is always available for those that don't comply. Along with that, you know, as was evident in the last council meeting, the short-term rentals is and continues to be an issue. We work with our partners in planning and with legal on ongoing enforcement efforts in order to maintain that neighborhood integrity. This has been a concern that's been voiced on many fronts. Where I come from, it was also a program that we engaged in, and we're continuing to address this with enforcement and working with our partners for solutions moving forward. Additionally, Waco has an aging housing stock. It actually creates a pretty wonderfully unique paradigm when compared to modern housing development practices, but it can lead to an increase of potential concerns for individuals who may not have the needed resources, especially as it relates to exterior maintenance issues like painting and fencing that cost a lot of money, and indoor infrastructure issues such as plumbing and electrical, just to name a few. And we'll get a little bit more into that as we go forward as far as it relates to our partnership with housing over the last year. And then the aging multifamily infrastructure, which I'm really going to key into on the last slide on this presentation. Nope, I went too far. Some of the changes that were implemented prior to me and are currently in process is previously we were aligned with two code officers per council district. This was a little bit geographically challenging. So currently and moving forward, we have 5 geographic areas, some of which have 3 members, some are 3 code officers, some have 2, some have 1. But with a lot of focus around central neighborhood and some of those fragile neighborhoods that we're really trying to key up on to keep them from turning or to bring them back from the brink. We do continue with more education and less enforcement with an increased focus on both proactive work, and especially we're going to be working on a lot of proactive work along the major corridors and commercial corridors and thoroughfares to start bringing in a lot more commercial development into this. As I indicated before, some of those neighborhoods that are in the central area where we have a lot more code officers are kind of highlighted in the purple. This map it's a heat map, but it's not articulate to all the work that we do. If we can provide maps for that, but they're also available online on our dashboard reports, and those are a more accurate depiction of what we're doing across the city. But these particular maps right here kind of show this is the bulk of what we do in the core areas and along those fragile neighborhoods where we're really doing a concentrated effort. Again, more education than enforcement, with enforcement being just, you know, what we have to if we have to. Some basic numbers for you. Obviously, the bulk of what we do is nuisance, you know, the unclean premises, the litter and things of that nature. weeds and grass with the annual grass letters for the vacant lots that we tend to deal with a lot. That's kind of the bread and butter of what we do. We do a lot of zoning issues. We have a dedicated zoning inspector. Junk vehicles, residential structures and commercial structures. We'll get a little bit of that when we go into the BSC. Communication, as I've probably said 3 or 4 times now, is we are trying to educate versus enforcement. In 2020, we did see a decline, and I think every city saw a decline in the amount of neighborhood association meetings that were going on or that we were able to attend. However, the trend has been moving up, and it seems to be trending that way more and more. Since I came on in January, we've attended 6 neighborhood association meetings, and we have 3 more scheduled for this month. We've worked hand in hand with our partners at Neighborhood Engagement, who've been providing us lists, and of course, they also have the information posted online. And they've been attending pretty much every meeting I've been to. They've been to as well. So we're working partnership on that. Going to all those meetings to make sure that we have a presence there. The area officer will always serve as the first point of contact. But we make it real clear that when we're attending these meetings that there is no wrong door to contact us, and that they can contact anybody in code compliance, whether it's a code compliance related issue or whether it's another issue. We'll connect those dots for them. And as I indicated before, with our partnership with housing over the last year, now that we're under the same umbrella, this does give us an education opportunity that we didn't previously engage in as much, where we can have a lot more connection with housing and understand what they do and communicate that a lot better to our residents and to the people of the city, so that we can provide them better information to assist them on the ongoing effort. So that is something that we do engage in at these meetings when it's brought up, and it's been very helpful. Mowing is kind of the bread and butter of what we do. There's about 5 to 6 months out of every year where we are we're mowing and going. However, with that said, we will continue to explore opportunities to make it better. One of the things we are going to look at this year is we will be trying to take enforcement action with the focus on repeat violators and problem properties, so that we're not just mowing their properties and charging them for the mowing and an admin fee, so that better to get them to engage in their property, especially with the absentee owners that really just are using the city to mow the properties for them. Hopefully this will incentivize them to start maintaining their properties versus just having the city maintain it for them. We are going to be looking at exploring some changes for the 2022 calendar year mowing cycle. But right now, since we're about to get heavy into that, it's probably a little too late for that, but we'll be working on some more changes for next year that will free up inspector time so that they can concentrate on a lot of other issues other than mowing rechecks. Another change that was made, and this will take up 2 slides, this came on within the last quarter, were changes that were made in the Building Standard Commission. Staff recognized that there was a need for change to this. We had a backlog of cases, and it resulted in hearings taking several hours. We also noticed that these hearings could go in any number of directions. So there was a need for a formula to apply an equitable distribution of those civil penalties and kind of even it out to make it more fair across the board, because they do have the final say in everything. So this kind of gave them a template to go by as they're dealing with both residential and commercial properties, which were those cases that were referenced on the slide from earlier, and the violations that they have. The program was revamped. Oversight, instead of each code officer having cases that they brought, the oversight changed to management, and now one code officer takes cases to the board. Really kind of streamlines it down, makes it a lot more effective. Legal conducts training and education for the new members. We're providing agendas in advance to get the board knowledge and information that they need, instead of just kind of giving them everything right then and there when it happens. We before, when we were having monthly or meetings every other month, they were taking a long time, both because you were putting too many properties into one meeting, and because you were waiting to have them once every 2 months. We now have monthly meetings, and we do a lot of in-house work sessions to try to basically to streamline it and just make it a better process, and to memorize the material prior to going in there, so that the board members' time is not wasted in any way, and we can just go right through it. It's really proven to be very effective. And we've had a lot of positive feedback from several board members that they have really enjoyed the changes that have been made over the last several months. And so it's really worked out in a positive direction, and we've seen real good progress on that. Some of the more next steps is, of course, we do reporting, and we report quarterly by district. We compare those to our key performance indicators and how we're doing in that regard. We'd like to start using those dashboard numbers that I mentioned earlier a lot more. Those are really a lot more reflective of the work that's going on. And it maps it out a lot better. It shows, I mean, you can go to that website and it'll give you every dot that we're currently working, and it'll give you every dot that we've worked in the past. So, I mean, it goes back quite a ways. So if there's anything, that you want to look at, we can always look at it, it's all on there. Two of the programs we want to look at, one is small, one is big, but they both have large potential and large impact. Once we get out of the weeds and grass season, we're going to look at a neighborhood enhancement team approach. And you may have heard of this. There are a lot of cities that do this. This is essentially where you pick a couple of streets or a very small neighborhood, like a fragile neighborhood that you want to keep from turning, or one that just really needs some attention. And you don't go in there with the basis of total enforcement. You go in there and you benchmark everything because you want to be able to qualify what you did at the end. You set up a public meeting for all stakeholders, which includes, if you're a renter, if you're an owner, an absentee renter, commercial, multifamily, anything and everybody that has a stake in this area. And you invite them to a meeting. At the meeting, you kind of outline what you found when you were out in the area benchmarking, kind of show them what you're looking for. And then you give it about 30 days to see what all they correct on their own. Additionally, with that, you want to provide, we make those connections to housing for those that need any kind of assistance, because there are many avenues for that. And then we work with our partners like in solid waste. Solid waste has been amazing since I've been here, to try to get like dumpsters or roll-off dumpsters put out there for neighborhood cleanups and things like that. And they do that on their own too, but this ties into that very well. And you do all that. And then when all said and done, you benchmark again to see where you got with just voluntary type stuff. And then after that, you pretty much go down the path of standard code compliance, which in Waco is we typically issue a notice. That's the educational side. Then we'll issue a warning. And the warning is still a lot of education on that because there's no fine associated with that. So that you're getting two documents to basically say, hey, take care of this. And then ultimately it can come down to citations and abatements, but hopefully those are few and far between. And once the program is done, you then do another benchmarking to see where you're at and what it accomplished and see if it was effective or not. The other program we're looking at doing, and this kind of ties into to keep Waco beautiful, I know this was mentioned earlier, is to get code compliance out from underneath the umbrella that is, typically always enforcement. We wanted to enact something that would, make a positive impact and show that it's not just about writing tickets and writing warnings or writing notices for that matter. And we did reach out to Keep Waco Beautiful, and they're on board too. So it'll be a good collaboration. If anything, just to, so that we're both doing sort of the similar things for similar efforts. And this is where essentially it's a reward for those properties that are going above and beyond for the beautification of Waco. And that can be single family, it can be multifamily, it can be commercial. You kind of spread it across the board, and you basically meet with the property owner if they're applicable to it. You send them a letter thanking them for what they've done and for their commitment to the city. We'll create some little signs that they can put in their yard, basically just saying that they're the property of a month, they're property of a quarter. What's in the name of a rose, I guess, is, just whatever we choose to name it. And, it's just to reward them for their efforts and to show that, it's not all about enforcement. And as we move on, we'll keep track of this and the success rate, and hopefully it will inspire their neighbors to do the same. Then the big one that we got going on is the review the possibility of enacting a multifamily annual property inspection program. There is a need to get ahead of this. We want to review, create, and implement an inspection program in order to proactively summarize issues at these multifamily properties across the board. We believe that proactive inspections are needed to protect the residents from deteriorating conditions. And we want to create an environment that compels property owners to prevent those same deteriorating conditions from occurring. Additionally, this will serve as it'll create a conduit where we can meet with residents and provide them, again, additional assistance and to the people at housing that have the means capable of helping them if they're interested in doing that. Many residents may not even realize that we can provide assistance to them. Whether they know about housing or not, they may not realize that code compliance can serve as a way to force property owners to go in there and correct issues that are directly affecting them, especially like health issues, hot water and things of that nature. Additionally, we have had concerns from a lot of residents that basically they're afraid of retaliation if they report code issues. Well, a good multifamily program, what that will do is we will do inspections, as you can see on the slide, both interior and exterior. And so we can get into more interior units and take care of those issues without them having to report it to us. if they choose not to, or if they're afraid of retaliation, because, we're doing this automatically, without, obviously it would be with their consent to come into the unit. We would never go into a unit without consent, but it would provide that avenue so that, we could catch stuff without them having to be the complainant and without them having to worry about retaliation. We're currently in the process of basically identifying the known universe. We're estimating right now at about 230 complexes, but more is needed on that. We need to do on-site investigation just to see if all of those are accurate. We need site plans to determine the number of units, emergency locator forms, just all kinds of things that need to be in the works. And then just to create the program. Or we're going to use a current ordinance, or we're going to do a new one. We want this to be a risk-based system, and what this would do is it's a system that essentially it puts the resources where it's needed. So you would go through and you would do a property, and based on the number of violations you have would determine how much of an inspection you get the following year and then the following year. And so the more violations would compel us to do more inspection to see what's going on out there. And the reward is if you're maintaining your property, you're going to have less to deal with code compliance, and you'll have less to deal with residents, complaining about anything that's going on in the complex. So it's really twofold in the sense that it will get us out of there for you to run the complex the way it needs to be run. And in running it the way it needs to be run, you'll make the residents happy and hopefully make more money. We anticipate this to be a self-funded program, but we'll be back to the future with you in more detail. And with that, even though I talk 90 miles an hour, that is it. Anybody have any questions?
This is Holmes. I'll kick it off. Great job, James. Nice presentation. And I like how you're thinking about the reporting and KPIs, and because I think the code enforcement, since I've been on council, has kind of been sort of we haven't gotten the reporting to council hasn't been as clean, I'll say, or consistent. And I think there's room for some improvement there. I like your neighborhood enhancement team approach. I think that makes a lot of sense, and how you're thinking about moving code officers around. The multifamily annual property inspection, I think, is also, I think we saw some benefits there as we went through kind of a sample project there last year. Going back to that KPI, are you satisfied that we have the right software and kind of a system to kind of support what you're trying to do there, James? Because it just seemed to me that when this came in a couple of years ago, it was kind of an Excel spreadsheet and year-old information and 6-month-old information and nothing tied together. But are you satisfied with the software and the system that we have in place, or can you comment on that?
We are definitely looking into other software options. In fact, we have next week we have it scheduled to do a demo with the software company, and of course we're going to be doing more demos to see what we can do. Specific to the KPIs, they're okay. They're a decent measure, and they're worth comparing to all the other data that we've got. There probably are some needed changes on those data sets, and that's why we're looking at developing with other software programs. So to answer your question, yes and no. It's pretty good, but there's certainly a means for development and change, and to move forward with.
Great, thanks, James.
James, thank you so much for the presentation, and it's a pleasure meeting you virtually. I do appreciate your report. I'm so excited about many of the initiatives that you're beginning. The neighborhood engagement initiative, I think that is wonderful. I mean, we have seen over and over when people feel like they're taking ownership of their or when they feel like they have ownership of the neighborhood, they take better care of it. And so I think that it goes to saying, and as we begin to involve code enforcement or code compliance, which is very near and dear to my heart, with our neighborhoods, I think we'll see a huge benefit to that. Congratulations on the changes with the Building Standards Commission. I think that is wonderful that we are moving to monthly meetings, because I have noticed that sometimes the every other month meetings would get lengthy, and at times it would be frustrating not only for the people that were at the hearing, but also the commission board members. And so I think it's a great idea moving those meetings monthly. I really applaud your initiative on incentivizing property owners about mowing their lawns and making sure that they are kept neat and in good shape. As Bradley or Deidre would tell you, you know that that is something that I pay a lot of attention to, at least within District 2. But having said that, I do think it's great practice, and I know we've been doing a lot better job at this. But if we are going to be incentivizing or asking our property owners to make sure that they take care of their backyards and mow their lawns, that we as a city are doing the same for our own lawns and our own properties that we own as well. Especially, you know, when it's in the middle of a huge neighborhood or an area that is very visible. And so I do appreciate that we're focusing on that. I love the reports that we're going to get by district. I know I'm very intrigued by that, the quarterly reports of how that is playing into part, the use of the dashboard, your plans for use of the dashboard, and how our constituents can get involved with the process. I think for some reason in the past, code compliance or code enforcement has given some of our residents a bad taste. Just even the mere words, and I think changing the perception that, hey, code compliance and code enforcement are good things for the entire neighborhood and for the districts. I think that we're on the right path. I really have to applaud you for your multifamily inspection program. As we have seen over the last several months, we have there's been some cases, whether during the ice storm or beforehand, where if we would have had these inspection programs in place, maybe it could have prevented a lot of this from happening. And so I look forward to hearing more of your plan and processes for that. Overall, great presentation. I'm excited about the direction you're taking this department. And so I really appreciate your efforts with this. So thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, James, for the presentation. I had the privilege to see you at the Northeast Riverside Neighborhood Association meeting, and I know that our communities are dedicated to their upkeep and come with many questions for you, as you saw that evening. I am really excited about the perspective that you're bringing to this. I mean, one thing to go beyond code enforcement to code compliance, even to neighborhood enhancement. It's about perception, and it's about how we find our place in that particular role, right? So, you know, from this, you're giving our constituents an opportunity to be empowered, number one, which means they are more engaged, which is good. I've got lots of little stars and notes, so I'll go through quickly. What does compliance education look like for the person who does not attend neighborhood association meetings? Is there a door hanger or something that can go, you know, if we get a little, you know, I'm the over communicator, so, you know, fight me now. But, you know, I want you to start thinking about what that looks like, because there are a lot of people who are engaged in the neighborhood who do not go to neighborhood association meetings, but they need an opportunity, and putting it in their water bill is not enough. Okay. So, secondly, I'm real excited, and I was excited. I told Galen then about the dashboard about the code compliance business. Is there a YouTube tutorial on how to read that?
There may be, not that I'm aware of. I don't want to say there is, but I can certainly look. I'll chase it down.
I mean, just give it a thought, because I mean, you know, when we don't know how to do things, we go to the Google and we go to the YouTube, so we can have an opportunity again to empower ourselves. And, you know, it's like, oh, I didn't know how to do that. Well, if we put on the website that there's a tutorial on how to read this and what you're looking at, then people will go ahead and do the things that you want them to do. Thirdly, will the area officer remain the same consistently? So if my district is assigned a code officer, is that going to be our code officer, you know, from here to eternity?
Yes and no. Typically, you want to have an officer in an area for several years, because it gives that officer the opportunity to learn the ins and outs, to make those connections. But it is kind of healthy every now and then to switch things up. So sure. I guess the short answer is yeah, you want them in there for several years, but not permanently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just meant, is it going to be something? I'm talking to this person this week, and then 2 months later it's somebody else, and then I had to re-explain. You know, I just wanted to know, was there some consistency within, so we can begin to start looking to that person as our connected community influencer, right? So then they become the safe space regarding code compliance. For the mowing efforts, yes, I applaud that, because when, the efforts especially of holding our lot owners responsible and keeping them connected to their own property. But I do understand that something has to be done via the city, because see, when the lots get overgrown, that's when the animals come out, and they don't respect boundaries and won't stay in that vacant lot. And so they move around into the neighborhood and get in other folks' houses, launch. So, I know that part will be important. I appreciate the terminology of fragile neighborhoods. And I need to say that out loud to you, that is a very thoughtful way to consider some of the issues that we're having within our community. So I appreciate that. It's not a term I had heard before, but I like it very much. And lastly, I love the idea of rewarding those who are doing what we ask them to do, or going even above and beyond, not just within the neighborhood association getting the yard of the month. I mean, I know that's big, and when I was living in Houston, that was very big in the subdivisions, to who's got the best yard or whatever. But I think it's really cool that that we have an opportunity to do that citywide, and not just within a neighborhood. So bravo to that. I said lastly, I was just kidding. Multifamily, the multifamily rental registration, I think, is a great idea, and something that is absolutely necessary. And I think it will serve as a starting point to what we should probably consider for the city, and that would over time expanding to even single family rental registration. I know we're not there now, but I think that this is a definitely strong starting point. So I look forward to seeing how we progress, and seeing how you lead. Well done.
Thank you. As it relates to the vacant lots, the beautiful thing about if you address those repeat properties and the absentee owners that aren't maintaining it, the mowing process and the citing process, or the enforcement, they can run hand in hand. So you don't have to wait for citations before you can mow those lots. So there won't be any delay on getting those lots mowed. It'll just hopefully incentivize the owner to be, I don't want the city doing it for me. And back to that neighborhood association meeting, I don't want to say his name because he may not want me to say his name, but the gentleman that was worried about the weeds and grass, I spoke to him yesterday, and a shout out to utilities, because they maintain that area. And when I was talking to him on the phone, he said somebody was out there right then and there working on it. And while I was talking to him, he gave me 3 lots that are 3 areas with some illegal dumping, and we've already got those out to special bid. So it's all working great.
James, this is Kelly. I really appreciate, like has been already said, the presence of your office at the neighborhood association meetings. There was, I was at the meeting you were at Bona or Brook Oaks a few weeks back, or a few months back, and then there was also representation last night. And I think just that access to information, so residents know that you're always going to be there. And I often keep receipts and napkins in my car, and I'll just be writing things down as I'm driving the neighborhood of, okay, there's a mattress here, things look sketchy here, we need to look into this fence here, but knowing that you're going to be there every month is really helpful. For the neighborhood enhancement team, could you speak a little bit more to that? I'm really intrigued by the idea, and sorry, my cat is making an appearance, and I really appreciate the strategy behind that, of focusing block by block or neighborhood by neighborhood, to then increase. It sounds like we both have to do catch up to get us to a good solid place, and then to maintain that level going forward. But would love to hear you speak a little bit more to the enhancement.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. It really comes down to, right off the bat, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. So you don't go into like a whole neighborhood, like with Brook Oaks, you couldn't go into all of Brook Oaks and do it. They're just, it wouldn't be possible or feasible, and you end up just kind of spinning wheels. You want to pick just a couple of small streets, or not even small streets, maybe one large street, but you want to have, you don't want to do more than say about 100 parcels. And that's about as much as you want to do. And so you pick an area that could use some help. It can be all single family. It can be, a mixture of single family, multifamily, or a mixture of, even throwing commercial in there. And the idea is to go in there and benchmark and see what that universe is. What are the violations that kind of encompass that area? What are the issues that they're having? We have the public meeting, or we do the benchmarking first, just to kind of get an idea of what the issues are there. Then we have the public meeting to those that need resources, we can then connect them with resources. And it's not just calling out for the public meeting. We'll send them information as well, like any kind of brochures or anything like for the housing assistance and stuff like that. But when they come to the meeting, we can actually engage with them and kind of help connect those dots even better. So it serves for that. It serves to let them know that these are the kind of issues that we're looking at and that we're going to be addressing, and some of the issues that we've seen in their neighborhood, in order to get them to proactively fix it without any kind of enforcement, including even a notice. This is just talking to them, trying to see what they'll do. And sometimes you get a good turnout, and sometimes, maybe not. But hopefully you can, you'll get, if you get 1 or 2 to fix it, you might get 3 or 4 to fix it, and they might get 4 or 5 to fix it. And it's kind of a snowball effect or an avalanche effect. And so you want to incentivize them to show that we're not just here for enforcement. We can connect you to resources if you need it. Going back to solid waste and how awesome they are. We can get roll-off dumpsters to put in the neighborhoods, because a lot of times it's just a matter of, disposing of stuff. And if the roll-off is there, it's easy and convenient. And you'll find that if you put one of those in a neighborhood, it'll fill up like that. I mean, it'll fill up with trash. And, just depending on, budgetary issues, how much can we do? And how much can we take back and forth to the landfill and such? And so it doesn't just have to be a one-time shot. And then you go back through and kind of show the results. And of course, eventually you can get to the enforcement side, where you issue those notices, which is a lot more education, a warning, which is actually filed with the court, but the warning doesn't have a fine associated. So right there, you've got 2 different levels of notification to kind of educate them, to get them to do it for any of the holdouts. And then hopefully amongst themselves, they're also trying to get that kind of compliance. And ultimately, if you have to go to citations, you can go to citations. And especially like with vacant lots, we abate those, we can clean up, and then we can also offer assistance. There are many things that we could do to help out, whether it be, simple cleanups of the street, which, I've seen code officers clean up alleyways, as was discussed earlier, where they're just throwing, tires in the back of their trucks and doing stuff like that. And so that's all stuff that we can do. And even with consent from a property owner, if they've got some brush that they don't have the means to get to the curb or to throw away, we can offer assistance if they're okay with us coming onto the property and doing that. So we can always offer help in that regard too. So it's kind of a collaboration of many facets coming together in order to get a whole result. And what you're typically going to find is that at the end of it, the neighborhood's going to look a lot better, or that particular area of the neighborhood's going to look a lot better, and it's just going to be more aesthetically pleasing. And hopefully it'll bring a sense of pride to want to maintain that. And we keep going across the board. So, I mean, we can do it over and over again anywhere. Now, it's not a program you want to do during your peak season, during like the weeds and grass, because we're just doing a ton of weeds and grass and there's not a lot of time. But it is something during the off season that you want to engage in. And it doesn't have to be just we're doing it here and not only there. You can hit it in several areas because it's not a heavy enforcement material or heavy enforcement entity in that regard, bad wordage. There's a lot more time to get them to do it. So you end up doing less enforcement by doing a lot of education up front. And, you got the meetings and all that kind of stuff, but that tends to get a lot of the stuff taken care of before you have to write tickets and go to court and things like that.
Awesome. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I appreciate your code enforcement is something I think we all care about, but not necessarily something that like really energizes us. And so hearing your passion and your vision for how we can address this in the city is exciting to me, and grateful to have you on board and looking at how do we bring all the right people to the table, whether that's Keep Waco Beautiful, neighborhood associations, solid waste. So just want to say that I'm really appreciative of the thoughtfulness and the big picture thinking you're doing right now.
Yeah, neighborhood engagement, solid waste, and utilities have all been awesome. Not that anybody else has been awesome, but sheriffs are awesome. I mean, we've had a lot of cooperation from a lot of entities.
I'm going to have to very respectfully disagree with Councilmember Palmer, because I actually nerdly get energized by code enforcement. As city staff and some other long-term council members will roll their eyes over my incessant discussions on this. But no, I'm just kidding around, Kelly. I really appreciate that. But my first question for you, James, is what is the software that we're using now? How are we tracking this now?
The main software we use is something called Entergov, and it's a web-based software. And it's just a standard code. Well, not just code. There are a couple of departments that use it. I know planning uses it. Utilities does not use it, and I'm not aware of everybody that uses it. And it's just a tracking software is what it comes down to. So addresses and offense or violations and notes and pictures and kind of the whole shebang of what you would do in code compliance. And it's just a tracking software. And it's totally. Energov, ENERGOV.
If we wanted to get a report on outstanding code compliance matters now, how difficult would that be for us to get city manager to send that to us?
It wouldn't be difficult at all.
Good. That might be. Bradley, I'd love to see one of those. And what are the best ways for citizens to report code enforcement now?
One of the things we were looking at is they can report them online, and we tested out with Halsey and his group that they can report it, but it wasn't anonymous. They would have to put their email in. So that's something we're looking at doing, is where they can take out the email so they can report things anonymously. They can always call their code officer. We have a main line that they can call. So there are numerous ways that they can contact us. They can flag us down as we're going out on the street. I heard earlier about revamping the website. And so, the website does have the phone number they can call to report anything. But I'd like to see a lot more over the next year of a lot more engagement in the website as far as reporting issues. It's not that it's hidden or anything. It just, I think there's room for improvement there. And especially to make it a lot more easy to just, click on a button and put it in there and then it's done. A lot of cities have also gone to app-based reporting, where they have an application that you can download to your smartphone. And so that would be something, in the future too, to look at.
And James,
Mayor, can I, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna make sure that the council knows, and James being new, we're probably catching him up on some of this on the fly here, but that is definitely a goal of the citizen reporting tool, the app, is that a person could have a single spot to go report a pothole, a code issue, or variety of topics, so that they're not downloading 10 different apps to engage with our city departments.
Yeah, and this Holmes and Merritt, just following your nerdiness on this issue, because I think one of the response time is what we were concerned about too. Not only just tracking what was happening, but the action itself and how fast we were getting to it. And it seemed like there was a disjointed information was coming from 2 or 3 different places, and it wasn't unified. But can you saying this system that we have does pick that up, or is it another system we need to look at? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow that thought.
Yeah, well, the system can track, of course, when the concern is submitted and when it's put into the system, and then it can also track the first time we go out and do an action. And so from there, you can extrapolate, how long it took for that first action to take place. The KPI measures that were mentioned earlier, though, those aren't more about tracking from when it's turned into first contact, but rather, from when it's turned into compliance. Let me see, it has there are 3 measures that are on there. 2 of them are basically the same. Just one is for housing violations and one is for nuisance violations. And actually, no, I think the first one is that. I think the first KPI measure is from, that one is for from first contact to, oh, here, let me pull it up, because I've got a whole spreadsheet right here about it.
I don't mean to put you on the spot there.
Yeah.
Response time and resolution time. That's what seemed to be getting out of hand, which led us to getting more code officers. I just want to make sure our guess was right, and that follow up is validating the way we are treating the issue. And not this second, but more conceptually.
Yeah, the KPI measures don't actually catch that. What they catch is the one that I was talking about is the percentage of code cases solved through voluntary compliance. And then the other two measures are basically the same. They just capture two different offenses. So it's average days from first contact to compliance, but that doesn't capture what I think you're looking for, which is when it's reported to when we're out there for the first time. And that is a report that I believe Intergov does track. I'll double check it and make sure. And if it's not, that is certainly something that as we meet with the software developers moving forward, that we want to track. There are many things that we want to look at to enhance the system moving forward, but I'll definitely check into that and follow up with you.
Awesome.
Real quick software follow-up question. Sorry, Mayor. With at the last BONA meeting that you were at, James, you mentioned someone had asked about whether or not our like enforcement letters were going out in Spanish. And I think you had mentioned that our current software doesn't have the capacity or the capabilities to do that. Am I remembering that correctly?
What it comes down to is it can't capture when an inspector writes notes, it won't capture that. But there are free form, or not free forms, there are templates that you can utilize that you can change into Spanish. And it is something that was discussed previously that we are moving forward with in getting that. We currently have 4 official Spanish speakers. So that if they call up here, we can have somebody help to translate for them. And on those notices or anything we send out, there is a little disclaimer that says you can call up here to ask any kind of questions. But we are definitely looking into that, and that's one of the things that we're chasing down to try to get those templates translated into Spanish, so they go out in both Spanish and English to everyone across the board.
We love that. This council just deeply values equity and recognizing that linguistic equity is an important need in our community. So would love to see that transition from the line in Spanish, like you're saying, to the whole document offered bilingually.
Yes, ma'am.
I just to kind of echo what Councilmember Bearfield's saying about communication earlier, once we roll out that app, I think that having a really big time, robust marketing strategy for all of the amenities that might provide, including code enforcement, is going to be critical. Serial offenders, do we have a separate way to track serial offenders? Because obviously if we're kind of doing this warning, work with you system, if it's a serial offender, I just question, I guess, if that's the same approach that we need to take.
On repeat violators, typically across the board, what you're going to have is that enforcement via notice and via a warning is optional. There's nothing that requires those two things. And so when you start getting repeat violators, you can skip a lot of that and go straight to enforcement. There's nothing in policy that dictates that, you have this amount of, if you get a notice or a warning, you're clear for this amount of time, you're going to get a ticket next time. But after, 12 months, then it goes back. There's nothing in that. It just comes down to inspector discretion when they're out there. And, kind of going back to not switching out inspectors a lot, they get to know their neighborhoods and they get to know those areas where those repeat violators are. And so they take that initiative to, when they see fit, to skip those measures and to go straight to enforcement. And so, even with that, of course, when we write a citation, it's always up to a judge or jury on a Class C misdemeanor if they're going to, find them guilty or not.
That's great. I just think from a timeline perspective, and really trying to see some beautification accomplished through this mechanism, repeat offenders might need a different approach. Love the art of the possible slide and just kind of this comprehensive beautification and neighborhood, wide effort that we can enhance. I think that's so innovative, and I think that it might make sense to have a broader conversation around kind of nodes or pockets that we start with. And by the way, I do think council members probably have a good ear to the ground on what's like a fertile, if you are going to like take a section or a little pocket, because of that, like you mentioned, it wouldn't be pragmatic just to be able to go through the whole thing. So like if your council members will know, hey, this area is ripe for this. And I think that there'll be a good resource there, but I think it might be incumbent on the city to come alongside that area too and say, okay, what are some public space things that we could do? Do we need to increase lighting on the street? Do we need to beautify some public space that's also adjacent to that? little side plug, just because it is getting to be that time of the year. I do know that when we issue citations or warnings or notices to the private sector for not mowing, we probably need to make sure that our own lots are being city-owned lots are being mowed as well. And it's just getting to be that time of year again. But I think that all of those things kind of going back to that as well. And I know that we've had discussions previously about a public increasing our TIF zones into some commercial spaces. And I think that'll bleed into the neighborhoods. So I think that there could be some broader strategies around beautification in general. And this will be a factor in that. But I love the creativity that you're kind of bringing to the table on that, what you said is the art of the possible. I love that. A question I have is, what are resources, say there's a privately owned property that has significant structural damage or is structurally out of code significantly. Are there resources available that we can deliver? I know in the past we had a contract with Habitat for Humanity for a rapid rehabilitation grant. And then I think we also had some an in-house component to that. What I like about having a heavy hand on the code enforcement side of things is being able to say, but if you need resources to get this compliant, we can point you to those resources. I think that gives us the freedom to have a high bar and a high expectation for maintaining properties. So just a question of the status of that.
So Mayor Meek, we currently have our rehabilitation program, and we have had referrals from code compliance. We have assisted, I think, 1 to 2 people through the program that were referrals. And so that program goes up to $50,000 to assist them.
Love it. Thanks, Renisha. I think that's just something to bear in mind too, both empowering the council, Building and Standards Commission, and the code staff to say, we are going to have a high expectation that people take care of their property. But if for some reason there's a resource need, we're prepared to address that. And I think that in so doing, that's a great return on investment to the longevity of neighborhoods and ensuring that these neighborhoods, these fragile neighborhoods, are tended to well. Another question I have is, do we have an inventory of vacant properties that are not code compliant? Not by vacant, I don't mean vacant lots, but I mean uninhabited commercial or residential spaces that are not code compliant.
No, sir, we do not. There are cities that have enacted vacant structure initiatives as that. I actually started a vacant structure initiative at where I was at previously.
Oh, awesome.
But currently there is not one. Although I will tell you, we enacted that, but it was quickly and swiftly within a couple months. It went administratively dead. There was no backing for it, and so if you look at the city, you would see that they have it on the books, but it is no longer utilized. And currently, we do not have one. The information is not too hard to get. You can typically run reports to water department and see. It's not 100% accurate, but it will give you some information.
I think it'd be interesting to see if there are. I mean, it sounds like which is no surprise, but are more well versed on the pros and cons to doing something like that. But the reason why is, again, if we really are going to target, maybe even really deep dive on some specific areas, and there's large numbers of commercial or residential areas that have been long vacant, do we need to intervene somehow? And would there actually be a return on investment to our bottom line to try to purchase that property that is obviously not being utilized by whoever the property owner is, and then resell it to a good community facing cause, knowing that is going to benefit our tax base, knowing that is going to benefit the neighborhood? That would be a creative level of intervention that I would just be curious about exploring, and that might be not a phase 1 mission for you, but I do think it could be something to kind of bear in mind, that as we are trying to really deep dive, what does healthy revitalization of communities and neighborhoods look like? That might be something to keep in mind too. On the multifamily, I'd like to hear more about that as you're looking into that. I have a high passion about making sure that slumlords are being held accountable for the interior of their buildings. But I want to think through unintended consequences of a self-paid structure. I think what would be helpful for me would be able to learn more about how other cities who have implemented this have done this well and what that's looked like. For example, an unintended consequence, if this is a self-funded, then that will pass on to the property owners and they'll pass that down to rent. So rent will go up. And so I just think we need to just think through, I would love to hear how this has been done well. I don't want to punish the good guys by being nitpicky with them, but I also want to punish the bad guys who are allowing folks to live in substandard conditions. So really want to kind of untangle that a little bit and learn more about that path forward. And I know that there's communities who have done this well. And so again, we don't have to recreate the wheel. I probably could get all my questions answered by just kind of engaging in some of that information there. I think that's everything I have. Man, I'm excited. I really appreciate this. I think that this is this is one of the tools that we have in our toolkit to really see healthy revitalization in our neighborhoods, but it is an important one. I'm excited to move forward in a positive direction. I really appreciate the creativity and innovation that you and other staff members have already injected into this, hearing how Building Standards Commission has been revamped. I mean, just like a ton of the changes that you referenced deserve a lot of praise because I do think that this is a really innovative approach. It doesn't go unnoticed. The number of enforcements and resolutions in that first or second slide that we saw were significant. So you guys are hard at work. But to your point, there's a lot of need regarding this with our housing stock. So I do think that this is going to be exciting and where we're headed, and I appreciate the efforts.
Thank you.
I think that's all, Bradley. We'll turn it back to you.
That is our last work session. Thanks, James, for joining us. And Mayor, I think all we have left is future agenda items.
Are there any future agenda items? I had one future agenda item. Bradley's going to laugh at that, but because I've said several this time already. But one is, I think that we need to have a council discussion about kind of reopening city facilities. And I'm not saying now is the time, but I think we need to start planning for that and start looking at what that's going to look like. We need to sit down and talk with event producers. We need to sit down and talk with doctors and make sure that we are not jumping the gun or moving too fast on something. But what I would hate to find out is we sit down with some medical experts and they're like, oh, y'all could have opened that up a month ago. And we're having this conversation in May or something like that. So I just don't think we've engaged in that discussion of like, what is the right timing? What are the right metrics for when we start to reopen facilities or utilize those facilities? And I think it'd be worthwhile for us to engage in those discussions. That's all I have. All right. Anybody else? We will now recess the work session and reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 4:37 p.m.
Sorry, Mayor, my screen just went out, so let me read it. Yeah, notice is hereby given that the City Council will go into executive session in accordance with the following provisions. 1, attorney briefing, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, Ruben Torres and Maria Torres versus City of Waco, cause number 2020-1040-4, pending in the 170th Judicial District Court. 2, real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072. 3, economic development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.087. And 4, personnel, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.074. A, City Manager Bradley Ford. B, City Secretary Esmeralda Hudson. C, City Attorney Jennifer Ritchie. And D, Municipal Court Judge Christopher Taylor. We are now in executive session at 4:38 p.m.